Hey guys, welcome back to Cause 3D. I'm Kyle, and today we're going to talk about the iconic DL-44, also known as Han Solo's blaster. So there's multiple versions of these blasters, but we're going to go kind of a hybrid style between what you saw on screen in A New Hope and a couple other minor tweaks here and there. But mostly, we're just sticking around the New Hope era of the blaster. So the first thing I want to do is I want to talk about the two that are sitting up here in front of me. And the one that is on this stand is actually from the blaster factory. I had ordered this a couple years ago, and I have to say this is an amazing, amazing piece. It's got some movable parts on it. You can buy multiple different versions of this where you can paint it yourself, aluminum. I think he does one that might actually be cast from a Denix Mauser, but fantastic piece of equipment. Love having this in my display case. The only problem with this one is I do dress up occasionally at conventions as Han Solo, and this particular gun, it's all metal. It weighs a ton. It clocks in at a little over, I believe, 3 pounds. So having that in your holster all day, it really drags your hip down. It starts getting quite heavy, as you might know if you've ever carried around a prop all day. Well, I think it was 2 years ago, I decided to get an airsoft Mauser off of, I believe it was off of Amazon, and I did some customization pieces to it to convert it over to the DL-44. And this one is closer to about a pound, maybe a pound and 4 ounces max, but it weighs considerably less than what this one does, almost a third less. Now this one has been great too, but it still gets a little heavy throughout the day, and it's not as accurate as I want. So what I decided to do today on this build video is I thought that we'd go on to Thingiverse, and I have 3D printed all the parts on there. I'll put a link in the description. I think it's a pretty accurate piece as far as the DL-44 goes from A New Hope, but it prints in multiple parts, which I really like because you can finish each part, put it together, it looks fantastic. But we're gonna dive into this build video, and I'm gonna show you how we assemble this. I have prepped most of these pieces just to make sure that everything fits together correctly, and done a little minor sanding to it. So let's get right into the build. Here we go. All right, guys, let's start this out. I use a hair tie to hold that trigger mechanism. Just a little bit of fiddling in there. And once I found that the hair tie works better than a rubber band or an O-ring that can degrade much quicker than what the hair tie seems to do. So once we get the trigger assembly in there, and again, I will link in the description where you can get the files for this. Also, they're free on Thingiverse. I don't remember the creator's name, but they are a great set of files. But it also comes with a booklet that you can print out and actually have for assembling this step by step. So now we're moving on to the back hammer and safety part of the gun, and you'll see that I grabbed some sandpaper here and there and just fixed a couple flaws that were in the print. So I'm pulling out the posts that hold the hammer in, and I don't glue these in, having to widen the hole there a little bit. But like I say, I don't glue these in because they do friction fit in there really nicely. You can actually take this gun apart at some point. Now I did find on this, sliding this part on, that it was binding up on the hammer, back hammer assembly. So you can see me trying to figure out what in the world it's catching on. Then once I figure it out here any second, I took that back hammer assembly back out and it slid right on just like it was supposed to. So you'll see me fiddling with this a lot, just trying to get everything set perfectly. Adding this part in, I do glue the stopper in, And I don't use a ton of glue. Not that you probably ever be able to pop this out, but in case you ever had to, I don't use a ton of glue. And at this point, putting in the sights, I do glue that all together in one step there. Now you'll notice too, at this, I haven't painted the gun yet. This is actually black resin that I printed it in, and I am going to paint it with a satin finish later on in the video, which I didn't film. The barrel, it lines up a certain way. Again, you can go back to the reference photos in the directions to figure out exactly how that lines up. Put on the cooling fin. I did want to do a little bit of work on the barrel. It didn't print quite as clean as I'd hoped for originally. So just giving that a quick sand before I attach it. And once I get it finished sanding, I slide it onto the barrel, and then I also like to tap this and put a hex head bolt in there to hold the barrel on. Which you'll see me fiddling with for quite a while. So the barrel is removable, at least on my build, in case I ever chip or snap or break the front end of the flash suppressor. Just putting the cover there on the bottom for the magazine cover. Again, I didn't glue it in, it friction fitted really well. Moving on to the rail for the scope. Now this part's a little tricky, so I'll start explaining it before I do it in the video. So you want to make sure everything fits, everything's dry fitted correctly. Now what I do is I take the posts and put them through the spacer here, but I pull the post back out after I use it as a guide. And you'll see me pulling that pin back out because I like to also glue in each piece as I build it up so that there's no weak points in it. So again, I'm going to drop the post in there, I'm going to line everything up and then pull the posts back out. Once that super glue cures, make absolutely, I'll talk about this trick real quick. So this post that I was working on that you saw me slip into the drill bit there, I was just using it to sand down some flashing that I had on it. So make absolutely sure before you get too far that you do not put both of the knurled pieces on either side of the rail, or else you can't slide this piece on. Now you can go in and put your final greeblies on. As you see the center one, I just glue it in. It comes with a post as well, but I never use the post on this build. And then you go back in, I put the post in to the knurled piece here and just drop it in. Again, dry fitting everything before I do it just makes life so much easier. So we want to make sure that we have a really good contact for the scope mount. So I'm sanding it down so that it fits perfectly into the recessed area of the scope mount. And this is another one that I dry fit many times before I glue it in, because I want it to be touching plastic to plastic anywhere it can, or resin to resin, so that it doesn't pop off if it gets bumped. And then that just gets lined up, pushed in. Use some quick set. Get that super glue to go ahead and charge. I'm just test fitting the scope at this point. Now I am throwing on the scope mounts because I'm getting ready to take it over to paint. I like to cover the grips in tape so that we don't get any paint underneath those grips. Again, if you're using a different color plastic or a different color resin, you might have to do some modifications of this. but I want to make sure that when I glue the grips to the gun that it has, again, contact, plastic to plastic, resin to resin, whatever it is. So at this point, we are ready for paint. I went over and painted all my brass pieces, which I just used reference photos. I have painted the body of the gun at this point a satin black. And now I'm going to start getting the scope ready. The scope I use a clear coat on so that it's shiny. The rest of the gun is satin. Now these parts that you see, the gray parts, the cylinders down there, those don't come with the kit. I 3D printed those myself. Those are so that what I have in my hands currently, I have cut through 2 pieces of plastic out of a Hobart face shield so that I can not have a hollow tube there. So I slide the cylinder in, I put glue into the scope, I slide the cylinder in first with the glue. I also have the piece of see-through clear plastic there, or the Hobart face shield, and I slide those all in together after I've dry fitted everything. And I'm going to do it a second time. So I slide that in, I pop everything in, including the brass scope outside, but I don't glue that part in. Get everything in there set, and then I go back and put the brass piece in, lining it up the way I want it. And now we're going to work on the scope adjustment piece on the top. And you'll notice here I did scrape off some of the paint that I had on there to make sure we get another good bond. And this piece was very finicky. I didn't dry fit it, and it finally popped in, and we're good to go. Now just gluing on the adjustment for the scope. We're going to move over to the grips. I painted the grips a chocolate brown and then took some black paint and wiped over them just to give them some wear. Again, here I just put the pin that's going to go in between the grips into my drill. I use a sanding stick just to get off any flashing that's in there so that it fits in nicely. Again, dry fitting. Can't say how important that is because there is a gap. So I did take those pins over to the belt sander real quick and just sanded them down to a better size so that I could get those 2 grips to actually touch each other. Now that I'm back, I've got them set where I think I need them, and it worked. Clean my surface off a little bit and apply some super glue. Now when I put the first grip on, I get it on as quick as possible, immediately followed up by the second grip, and then I just hold it, squeeze it. If there's any warping or anything, you can kind of get this ironed out as long as your warping is not too bad. I wasn't happy with the hammer because it kept falling. I couldn't get it tight in there. So I dropped a drop of super glue in there. That was a bad idea. It didn't work. I actually had to go back and fix where I dropped the super glue in, paint that again. So I don't think that was the way to do it. Dropping the brass pieces into the grip at this point. After I made sure that they fit in there on a dry fit. And now we're to the final mount of the scope. And I lose video footage here in just a minute on this part, but as you can see, I'm just putting the retaining pieces in for the top mount of the scope, and I'm about to put the first one in as well, and our video cuts out. All right, guys, thanks for joining us on this build. It was a great build, quick build. Took me a couple hours to do, obviously, after it was already 3D printed. I did go ahead and weather it, and as you saw in the video, and I probably mentioned in the video, I did do the brass off camera. I did all the painting off camera on this because the camera died on us, or the storage was full, one or the other. But we're at 3/4 of a pound on this one, so there is no weight comparison between this one and these two. And yes, it is 3D printed. Yes, it is slightly more fragile than a fully metal one, of course. But to carry this around all day, it would be absolutely no problem whatsoever. So again, thanks for joining us in the video today, and make sure that you hit the like and subscribe button, and we will see you in the next video.